Hi, I'm Conor Byrne, and this is That's What I Call Marketing, podcast where you'll hear from the leading lights in the marketing world and listen to their unique insights. Today's episode uniquely brings together the Backstreet Boys and design. How, you say? Well, I am talking to Image Now, a design agency who have been around as long as the Backstreet Boys. It will make sense when you listen to the episode. Image Now is, without doubt, one of the longest standing design agencies around, and it is Irish. And this year they marked 30 years in business, so I took time out to talk to founders Dave Torpey and Darrell Kavanagh all about that journey. We reflect on the design landscape, how things were incredibly different 30 years ago. And for anyone listening who wasn't around 30 years ago, it is wonderful to hear how things that we take for granted in terms of the tech that we use for design were not even being used, and how Dave and Darrell used that as their breakthrough. We chat about some of the amazing work that they have done, their bravery in getting some of those early clients, and the story about Riverdance is really wonderful. And for anyone who doesn't know, Riverdance was a phenomenal cultural resurgence for Ireland. It really brought us back onto the world stage. We also chat about the gaps that exist between marketing and design and what can be done to better the understanding between the two. Don't forget to subscribe to That's What I Call Marketing, wherever you are listening or watching this episode, so you can get a notification of when our next episode lands. But for now, let's get right into today's episode. Dave, Darrell, thanks a million for joining me on That's What I Call Marketing. Great to have
How
you
you
here.
doing? It's great to be here.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Good. Well, listen, before we get into it, I did mention at the intro that you guys are, and you wouldn't believe it if anyone's watching this, you guys have 30 years in business. And I was like, what else has been around for 30 years? And these would be surprising. So I went to music, I went to bands, Backstreet Boys, and they're still around. Born and Daft Punk. Are Daft Punk still around? I think they are. And
They disbanded a few years ago.
they just managed. See, there you go. You're further on the Daft Punk. Wilco are still around.
That's it, yeah.
But I think
I
maybe
went
it's Bad Boys for you too.
Duran there the other day. They're still around.
They're still around. They're longer than 30 years, though. They're longer than 30 years. But speaking to that, right? 30 years ago, 1993, a different world, completely, a different time. You both kind of met in college, am I right? Tell me about the origin story.
All right. So the origin stories, it's a little bit, it's actually, we're older than it. The firm is technically, it was incorporated in February 1993. But the previous summer, Dave and I graduated from the College of Marketing and Design. And obviously we were in the design side and we watched the marketeers from a great distance, except maybe this Indian over playing pool on the far side. We used to call that the dark side, actually. The marketeers were on the dark side and we were on the force for good. At the end of our college, after a few 4 or 5 years, you have a portfolio. The tradition is you have an end of year exhibition where you show all your work, and then hopefully companies or design agencies or ad agencies, they would come in, they would look at your work and they say, we'll give you a go. We might employ you. And that, and that's the great hope. But I always remember that Dave, and I'm speaking probably for him here. Dave was a very gifted designer. I used to watch him, obviously, because we're in the same class. He was across multiple disciplines, illustration, graphic design, photography, filmmaking. But he was very, very gifted in computers. And he's probably one of the first Mac generation that could handle Quark Express, Photoshop. He was very gifted. Yeah. I was very strong in visual communications and photography, and also probably good at talking. He was very good at doing. Yeah.
And
the two of us got to, I remember saying to him when we were at that exhibition, we were watching, ad agencies come in and design agencies. And I was saying, we're good enough. We're better than these guys. Why don't we go and try it ourselves, set up our own company, do our own thing? And literally in that exhibition, I went home that evening. I was a good photographer. He was a good designer. And I thought, where would a combination of great photography and design work together? And I thought about, calendars in those days. And those AIB, the banks would do big calendar jobs. And I sat down and I got the golden pages, and I rang all of the marketing departments of the banks at the time. And I got through to TSB Bank.
These are all things we want to have to explain to people. Golden pages, in call.
Yeah, in those days. So, and out of that, and that actually was our first client. We got the PTSB or the permanent TSB, or sorry, TSB. We got our first job was to do a calendar, which was a big job. And I remember we got the check then at the end of the summer. And with that check, with that money, we decided we would buy computers. And so we bought some more Macs, and we decided to rent a little place down on the Keys. And then we formally incorporated the company in February.
I was going to ask you, Dave, is your story the same?
Pretty much. Like, I think the thing is, Darrell alluded to it. Like I was always big into technology. I was always big into the idea of what it enabled within the industry, right? And I actually brought the first copy of Photoshop into the college for people to use. It was Photoshop
into Ireland.
Photoshop 1. Photoshop. Right? So that's how far back it goes. But it was a cusp in technology and design that changed from there onwards, right? So we were able to put together presentations and that were blowing away our competitors who were established in the marketplace because they weren't on that, evolution of design through technology. And so we quickly, as a company, snowballed because we were showing clients things they never expected or never saw before because of coming from a different perspective and using old design ethoses with new technology. And that kind of emergence really kind of cut a different ground. So you can imagine, like, this is before mobile phones, this is before the internet.
Yeah.
This was a different time altogether. And we just we thought, well, we can do this. We can do this because the technology enabled us to do it easier, but also we could do this because we looked at things differently to how the current state we're looking at it. So,
Kai, you're talking about a time, right, where you big ad agencies and they would, when they go to present a concept to a client, they would spend 2 to 3 weeks putting sketches, marker roughs, cutting out pieces from magazines and creating montages and sort of saying, this is what it might look like and this is what we hope it looks like. David and I, in 24 hours, were able to visualize exactly what it looked like in the marketplace. That is your calendar ready to go to print. That is your packaging ready to go to print. That is this is your new campaign or whatever it's got. And we could show it and the client could kind of make an informed, immediate decision, say, yeah, that's it. And so it was easy. Our work it was easy for us to make a mark because of our particularly the technology was a key enabler for us.
It's kind of interesting, like, you talked about those design showcases, and I do find it fascinating that, like, surely, like, agency heads and marketing leaders were probably going to that, and how they weren't seeing, like, the technology was coming, right? And then, this upstart kind of just disrupts the apple cart. And like, that first client obviously becomes very important, but, a calendar isn't going to build an agency.
No.
For you, as you think back over kind of the lifespan of the agency, and we'll get into the different iterations and kind of your views on how design has evolved, but what for you was kind of the client that made the difference, that made that this is real, like this is something that's like we've made.
There are plenty of historic companies that we've worked for, but there are ones that have been groundbreaking within Ireland and the world. So, for example, we designed Riverdance, right? So,
and that changed everything.
It changed so much, but it changed society as much as it changed.
I was going to say, Dave, like Sarah, because I think that Riverdance is a phenomenal story on so many levels. So I'd love to hear about, like, that, and then your role in kind of how did it come to you, and then, like, how I agree with you, it had such a massive impact on, I think, Ireland on the world stage. So please tell us that story. It's great to hear.
So Dave and I had a very strong interest in the arts and the theatre community. We started working with the Gaiety, the Abbey, the Gate. We were doing poster designs, a grand here, 1,500 quid there. Very difficult to build a business around. But at the same time, then we were working for corporate clients, the likes of, started to work with AIB, Telecom Éireann. They really liked the exciting graphic design we had. But we won the Dublin Theatre Festival again against some very established players. And we did a really strong piece of work throughout 1993 for that. And on foot of that and the waves that that created, got a phone call from Moya O'Doherty, saying, and I kind of knew a little bit about her, but not that much about her, and her husband, John McColgan. They were building out this new show. You know, it would kind of done this interstitial piece with Eurovision. I didn't even watch the Eurovision. And then I remember coming in today, but it said, they're going to do this kind of event or this kind of thing down in the
Point Depot, yeah.
New show. Yeah, Point Depot. And they gave us 3 weeks to put a presentation together for it. And I know we're up another, and we worked really hard for 3 weeks to develop the presentation for Riverdance. And when we made the first presentation, it was kind of a disaster, right?
Oh, was it?
We tried way too much. We introduced way too much technology and tried different layers, different imagery, different iconography, arranged different things. And I came back to the studio, and Dave didn't make the presentation with me. I made it with another designer. And I sat down with Dave about 5 o'clock that evening, and I said, look, we have a problem here. I don't think we've cracked this.
Like because that's a very interesting moment for, you know, you get the feedback from the presentation going, don't think we've cracked it. Where do you go? What's your process to kind of go and say, we need to simplify this or whatever, you know, I'd love to hear that process.
Yeah. Like the thing is you try and find like we call it the golden thread. There's something that holds it all together. There's something that nuance within it that gives you that kind of heart to it, you know, like there's a truism in every project if you dare to look for it, you know, and you just have to kind of refine and define, trying to get something to remember where the legacy and the history came from, but also set it free and go towards the future. So that's where I started kind of playing around with the typography aspect, and it was all quite hand drawn and there was a flow to it, because the dance in it, where although Irish dancing in the past was all kind of strict and structured, the Riverdance set a new way of doing it. So there was the whole idea of the river flowing and the flow of the dance and that aspect. Then, so that I kind of started using paintbrush and started painting the calligraphy by hand. So the Riverdance font is something I painted by hand originally. And then I kind of reformed the whole alphabet and rescanned it. And then the technology came over and I started redrawing the whole thing and made the typeface that it is there today. So like it's just really kind of finding that truism through it and that kind of flow to it. That once you cracked it, you know, you get this spark of inspiration. It just kind of hits you, and it's undeniable. And you go, hey, that's the thing. That's the one that's going to work. And then everything from that flowed. So literally, as Darrell was saying, the poster image, it became quite flowy and organic, and there's a sense of movement always in it. So it wasn't just a clean, perfect image. There was motion blur in the image. So it felt like there was movement in it. So that kind of informed everything going through.
That's amazing. Do you have the original
handwritten thing?
Drawings? Yeah.
Somewhere, I think I do.
But yeah, Riverdance was a real catalyst of change for us. And it catapulted us very quickly into the international stage.
Yeah.
And we were doing work then for MTV, Sony PlayStation. And we're involved with a number of UK projects, Orange and so on. So it really helped to place us on the international stage. And the agency grew quite quickly. It grew to about 30 staff in about 5 or 6 years and became a little unwieldy actually for us, it has to be said. But they were exciting times, the 90s. Everything was possible. When we were in college, they were saying, look, just prepare for the worst. You're going to have to go and live in the UK or live in the US. Get ready for the emigration, boys and girls. So, you know, it was a great time to be around. Like there was a newfound confidence in the 90s without question, you know, in terms of art, design, music. And, you know, we felt we could conquer the world. And then you move. And so it was, and, you know, the language of design in terms of the language, particularly from marketeers were beginning to really understand the role that identity, design systems and good, the provenance, the authenticity, they could begin to see that quality emerging. Particularly in Ireland as well. You know, traditionally in Ireland, it was just very campaign-led, marketing-led, you know, but one or two big iconic brands that kind of led everything. But everybody started to think much more about design, identity in the 90s.
I was going to ask that because obviously, like, you know, you talked about the early days and you kind of had the competitive advantage over, like, you were technologically more advanced than others. But, you know, obviously others caught up, right? And
Yeah.
probably quite quickly you started saying, actually, we're way behind here. We can't, afford to let these guys out on the landscape. How did that kind of change, or was it all happening at the same time where as they were catching up, you were doing things like Riverdance and you were kind of a step ahead? Did it work that way?
Yeah,
Or was it
like
kind of,
like that. It's if you're into technology and technologists, and you look at the world in that kind of way, you tend to move forward at a different pace, right? So you kind of are always looking to the
Yeah.
new, and I think it's always been a part of Image Now from the get go is kind of future focused, right? So always kind of looking at what way things are going to express. So in 1996 we set up Image Now Films, and we started doing animated work and film work and all sorts of other things. So it was adding on another layer in the storytelling of a brand, right? So in that way, but everybody always catches up, right? So and there's no stopping that, and people invest more and they're bigger, and especially ad agencies and that like that, they'll just buy everything they want, and just
Well, Accenture does.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So, but it's what they can't buy is the heart and the passion behind why you do it. You're just saying, well, following. So we always try to be trailblazers and look at things differently. But we went through some kind of quite pivotal things.
And we were all like, we always are, like we still are, always looking at, what's the story of VR? What's the story of augmented reality? What's the story of physical experience, digital experience, and the technology? And it is always in our thinking. The role that sound, mnemonics that they play, and the haptics and the movement on all that, like, there's just always going to be something. There's always something, and you just have to be open to that. But you got to layer it with great craft and great strategy. You really have to think deeply about kind of what this brand is trying to do, what market it's trying to connect with, what is the profile of the audiences, what are the problems you've got to solve, and then how can you layer in creativity, individuality, because that's our job, is to make a company look different from everybody else.
This is That's What I Call Marketing with your host, Conor Byrne. If you would like to get in touch with us, visit that'swhaticallmarketing.com and see how we can help you and your business grow through marketing.
And feel different. That's what we have to do.
Yeah.
So it's great standout. And there are a number of tools at your disposal to do that. And as designers, it's important, because in the world there exist only two things: it's nature, and then everything else is designed. Everything else is designed. So, so as designers, we think about the totality of all of these things and choose carefully to make sure clients stand out. So yeah, we're always looking outside the box.
But like this goes back to like the spirit of us. Like I was saying earlier about we're looking for the truism in a project, but like we have this fervent belief that everything has the possibility to be better through design and design thinking. So if you take that as a starting point, it's the ad plus when you approach a project. So how can you make it more than when you got a hold of it? And I think that's the way we kind of like to approach things. We kind of go at them going, where can we see this in the future? And, what's the goal here? Rather than being quite tactical and in the moment. It's not just now, it's now and the future. And
that's the real challenge with marketeers actually understanding what we think about design. We are not in the moment. We have to, we take it as a go that we have to be in the moment, but we have to produce things that could stand the test of time. And that, that over time they, because then that's a real challenge for us. So
I was going to ask, because honestly, it strikes me that there probably is sometimes a kind of disconnect, right? Where, do marketers understand the role of design, and are they looking at it in that long term? And I guess you guys understand the world marketers operate in often is quarterly, next campaign. And, how do you navigate that then with the clients that maybe come into you and saying, we want you to work on a design project, are you saying no to certain clients because they don't understand the role of design? Or how do you kind of bring them on the journey that, that you believe in? And I completely agree with the way you're talking, by the way, the long-term view.
I don't know. Well, I take this, Dave. I think it's so, first of all, we're not stupid. We run a business. We know that we have to generate a certain level of revenue and a certain level of return to ensure that the business runs. So we understand the world objective empirical data and results, whether it's quarterly or whether it's H1 or whether it's so. And actually, every design project we start with, we sort of say, if we can measure success in year 1 or year 2 or year 3, what would those KPIs, what would those measurements be? So we always start with kind of strategic intent. And then, but the thing that we always ask for really to try to, and bring marketers into the world of longevity and more medium to long term, we start to talk about purpose. We say, like, why do you exist? Why would it work for you? What makes you different? I usually ask 5 or 6 different whys. And then I get into legacy. What do you want to be remembered for? And these are difficult things to grasp with, and the more you dig, the more you dive for pearls, the more you get something out of that. This thing that you could sort of say, this truism is that we can build something unique for the brand and the branding. And the challenge, I think, when the marketers that really embrace the campaigns that they're about to create and how those campaigns sit in the wider tableau of how their entire brand is projected to the marketplace across all of the touch points, whether it's inside their office, whether it's out from a retail perspective, or it's online and handheld only. When they begin to understand those and the tone of voice, the way the identity or the brand or the communication speak with the way that they speak in terms of their values, in terms of, this is the culture that we have in, say, AIB or Ryanair versus the culture of Aer Lingus. They could provide both the exact same service, but very different types of cultures, and it's very clear and apparent in terms of the communication. The more that they think of those things, and that's what designers do, the more that they actually, then there's a chance that they can be much more successful in creating a great brand in the marketplace. I tend to think brand at 2 things. There's kind of brand, which is the experience, the reputation of that brand that is you stand for. And then everything else is branding, name, entity, graphic user interface, comms, all of that kind of stuff. It's branding. The marketeers that tend to have the sense of purpose and sense of reputation as equally important as all of the branding in terms of their symbiotic relationship between both those brands. We tend to find that those marketeers are they're quite visionary. They're very good, and they tend to build long-term sustainable brands over a period of time. It's tricky though, like we and it's a challenge that we find an awful lot. Like, make it smaller, or sorry, not make it smaller, make it bigger.
Bigger. Well, fill up that white space, please.
No. How do you navigate that? Because that is it. That, like, look, I've been there on the agency side and also the client side, and there's tons of evidence around ensuring that there's no risk of misattribution of your brand with another brand, right? And so within that context and in the commercial world, like, there is a bit of friction between the art and the commerce.
And it's a very simple one to fix for you, right? And I know you're going to say this. You need to have a brilliant brand identity with a brand identity system designed to enable you to build great attribution going forward. I mean, there's no magic formula as to why Vodafone or Apple, those brand identities are so strong and it's a strong attribution. They have built identity systems that are actually designed to work over a sustained period of time, sell all different types of products or services in all different types of ways. We'll come back. There's a system there designed to do that.
Also,
problem.
Yeah, but also there's the preciousness of retaining the quality of that system. So this is where sometimes it can fall flat, is that, I need something done in an hour and I need to get it done right. But you can still apply an amount of rigor to that hour that enables it to be the best that it can possibly be. Because it's the one thing that you do poorly that will be remembered the most. Right? So you have to think about consistency isn't about being consistently good all the time. Because it's the one thing. If you do the one thing wrong, that's what will be remembered the most. They don't remember the good consistency you've got. They'll always stick at the bad thing. So it's trying to get what Darrell was saying about getting that intent and the purpose all nailed down, but following through on it 100%. And all the big brands in the world commit to that. They have that balance between perfect marketing, perfect craft and design and brand, where they homogenize them together. They're as important as each other, not one or the other. The sales message isn't more important than the brand message. They are both as important as each other. They have to live and breathe the same. So we talk about, when we do our work, we try to expand minds and move hearts, all with the intent of setting new horizons for people to see those brands in the light that they should be seen in. So they can't be misconstrued or misrepresented. They truly understand in their heart, they feel that's that brand, and I truly engage with it, and I understand why they are what they are. Because when you get that, that's the magic, that's the gold dust.
And Connor, like the problem with being in Ireland, okay, is the investment in branding in terms of identity tends to be relatively modest. Particularly if you go to the US, say to US and UK. So we regularly deal with marketers who'll spend $500,000 or $250,000 producing a 30-second or 60-second TV spot, and they'll struggle to spend 150 or 200 grand on a really good identity system. And a really good identity system can take 6 months. We have to envisage every possible execution, role play all of the challenges, and then come back with an identity system to design to do that. We use different types of designers, a digital designer, a typography designer, a graphics, a different type of experience to put this identity system through rigor and real craft. So you come out with something at the end which really can stand the test of time, gives you that attribution. And like Dave says, it's 5 to 5 on a Friday evening. We've got to get something out, by 6 o'clock. It can do that within a relatively tight time. So it's like, it's really understanding the provenance and the value of great identity and how that works.
What should, if marketers are listening to this, because there's a couple of, I think, challenges you can bring up there, budgets are tight, things that, all that, there's pressures. But what can marketers do, I think, first of all, to understand the value of design? Because I think, and you made the point earlier on, I think in terms of education, we're educated on kind of the principles of marketing. Design kind of is almost like a small part of that education, I think, that people get. And so they're maybe fundamentally, how do people kind of upskill their knowledge of the design principles and role of design? And then how do they educate the organization? Because if you're a marketing director and you're trying to get your CEO to sign off on, a design budget of, X 100,000, what can they do to do that?
Well, I'll give you a few points. So that doesn't happen to us all of the time, right? So, and I have a lot of respect and a lot of understanding for marketers. Actually, by the time we end up dealing a lot with CEOs, and then by osmosis, we end up going, we work with marketers, and we tend to work with some visionary CEOs who understand the role of identity and brand. And they see their identity as one of their core strategic assets. It is strategically as valuable as the real estate portfolio, as the IP that they may have at a certain platform, or the level of staff that they have. They see the strategic value of identity and branding, and that you have to think differently and reframe, your set of expectations. Because marketing, if not, you're going to be labeled with sales, sell, and then. And I've always seen that tension between, is it sales and marketing, or is it marketing? Am I a sales director or a marketing director? And increasingly, we're seeing like brand and branding, which is corporate reputation, being discussed at board level, almost moving beyond marketing. And I think that's
something that's been around for a long time. Like I can recite how many times I've heard, 90% of the stock value of Coca-Cola is its brand. 90%, not its physical assets, 90% of its value to its shareholders is its brand. Now that goes to say a lot. Right now, each company doesn't have that kind of level of impact, but you can understand the value of that connection. And that's the thing. What I said about, moving hearts. If you get that connection, the value to that connection is lifelong, right? So how do you get that connection? How do you truly invest in building that essence and that connection with your brand to others? Because tactical marketing campaigns can bolster that connection, but it can't create it, right? So you have to create it through the brand and the strategy that has a path to go to a specific place. You have an intent to go there. Darrell used the line earlier, and we're going to use it a lot. What we do is make strategic intent visible. So we take your thinking and what you intend to do and make it in a way that realizes visually that customers can engage with it. And then the other layers of advertising and marketing add on to that, and it builds and builds and builds. So
It's the starting point, like in so many ways. And I think there's a huge misunderstanding in a lot of senior leadership that when you say the word brand,
Yeah.
the logo
what I've
mark.
experienced is
Yeah.
it's the logo, or people immediately think this guy's talking about a TV
Yeah.
ad.
Yeah.
Like that is, and it's like, it's that understanding of, no, that's not what we mean by brand.
Yeah.
Like, we mean brand. Like, you even mentioned salespeople. Like, when salespeople are on a call, like, that's the first line of your brand. They should be articulating your brand. And so
Exactly.
you want has to come through in every single touch point and experience that you have with the brand. Cause, and I loved your line earlier, Darrell, of, there's nature and everything else is
Yeah.
behind, right? Like, think about the world in that way. And then you're like, right. And it's busy. And so how do you then create that kind of intersections that
Yeah.
matter?
So I found, Connor, right, that regularly that design is the greatest expense that the board knows the least about. It is
Yeah.
unquestionably a huge amount of money design affects every aspect of the organization to one degree or another. And I'm not talking about just graphic design. I'm talking about design of systems, design of product, design of portfolios, all aspects. So, I've often, and some of the CEOs who dealt with, who really understand the strategic value of their identity and their brand. And when I talk about brand, I talk about their reputation and their kind of, and on all of all the look and feel that surrounds it. They really have a strong understanding of how design permeates so many aspects of their organization. And what they tend to do is they tend to use the identity and the identity system as a means to set a benchmark, to sort of say, this is the quality of our organization. This is what it is we stand for. This is what we believe in. All the press, all the things we say, all the things we communicate, they can become to be symbolized by this. But also, it's a very important thing to our staff, to the people, because great brands are great people.
Yeah.
We always say, So it's like, and, to get the organization focused, what we tend to find, CEOs actually use identity to get the organization focused on the customer, or the organization focused on the strategic things that the CEO or the executive team want to get through the organization, as well as marketing and sales and so on. So you've got to elevate, identity. It's difficult for marketers when if they begin to see that strategic asset and it's not just a moment of time. You just can't create an identity, say, there we go. You're constantly modifying it, constantly changing it, constantly iterating, constantly looking at the systems that support that and the identity systems. You're constantly looking at tone of voice and so on. So there's a kind of a whole range of different things attached to it that, it's just not a moment in time. It's good thing. So there's a science to it without a doubt, but there's there's also just a realization that, you are dealing with a highly, a real strategic asset. And, and it's up, if you want to get great returns out of it, you're going to have to invest in it, and you have to going to constantly manage it. So that's kind of saying.
Yeah.
But also on the
Go on,
other
Liz.
side of that, there's because there's our passion in doing the craft of design has an end goal. So what we try to do is improve things. So in the experience of interaction with the brands that we create, we try and improve the person or the consumer's touch point with that. So it adds to their life. So, throughout our history of working, for example, when we rebranded Dublin Bus, the major part of that was remapping the whole of Dublin's infrastructure as far as how the network was perceived, how the customer engaged with reading the timetable to reading the map, how the connection points within the buses, and try to homogenize it so the experience of the design was purely functional, but it left a really good feeling. So I now know how to get around the city, kind of thing, in a more easier, better way. So that kind of thinking is always at the heart of what we do. So again, I said it earlier, the added plus. Do we add to it? But plus isn't just an emotional plus. It's also a functional plus. It's a plus for society as well, if we have the opportunity to do that.
So that the Dublin Bus actually is a good one. That was about 16, 17 years ago now we did that. But back in the day when we were looking at it, Dave was right. We kind of went, look, how do we actually create a more happy experience, a more visible experience? And at its most simplest level, like the bus signs, the two most contrasting colors that exist in the visual spectrum are black and white. And the second is black and yellow. So we took black and yellow as the signature colors, simplified the entire system around that.
Yeah.
So, whether you had difficulty with visibility or difficulty seeing things, but also we designed it in a way that they were attractive, that people liked them on the streets and got great feedback.
Yeah.
So you create, and that's the London model as well.
Yeah.
Transport for London or London Grand. They create stuff that the populace are proud of.
Yeah.
And that pride thing is, Dave's right. You got to do that. You got to put the craft in. You got to shape
Totally.
it. They can't see it.
But
It's just a fails tool, actually,
even at that, like, for example, we insisted they painted the poles yellow. And it had two functions. One, that you wouldn't walk into it because chrome poles tend to
Yeah.
But also for, as Darrell said, for people, visual acuity problems and stuff like that. And now I know, because we've had discussions with them in the last few years where they changed the posts to green and yellow, which I don't get. But they tried to rechange the poles back to chrome, and the feedback was like, no way, you can't do that. All the different organizations, we can't do it. They have to retain their yellow. And it's the simplest, sometimes it's the simplest thinking and the simplest execution that has such a massive impact across so many levels. And it's just, we use the term, we were talking earlier about investment and stuff like that. The further you pull back the bow and in thinking, the farther the arrow and the thinking goes,
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Just like even timing, again, I always think it's interesting to think about when these things happened. Like, that was at a moment when people weren't walking into polls because they were on their mobile phones. You know what I mean? So your thinking wasn't in that moment.
No.
But yet you had that kind of foresight. As we think about the world, that we are in now, and, that world of people walking into polls because they're on their phones, how do you think that's impacting kind of your view on kind of design and kind of the future of design?
It's one of those weird things, because it's really funny, because when we set up the company, it was called Image Now Consultants, right? So although we did lots of more design then, but we're more consultants now. So we've come full circle, but it's engaging with the thinking. So like we have, obviously, personally, from a design point of view, there are things that are happening within the digital space that aren't necessarily good design things, right? So there's a homogeny happening. It's called blanding. So a lot of identities are all going to a certain look because it works on digital. But what's happening in that is then they have no clear differentiator anymore visually. They become just like a lot of others, and you can't tell them apart. And I think there will be a kick now to get back to individual stylistic approaches to different identity systems, and that just are, it's kind of losing the way. Technology is taking over too much at the moment, where ultimately you're talking about engaging with humans, and how do you get the heart back into it?
You go back to painting, and I mean that like
it's a great point making, Connor. Like, I think what we find is, like, we could tell you loads that's going on in digital at the moment. Dave's right. There's been a drive from Yves Saint Laurent, Prada, all these kind of brands of great kind of character and individuality. They're all simplifying their fonts. They're trying to make them more we call it blanding, not branding. To make it easier to buy or buy your product or service, move more quickly through a graphic user interface or UX on a handheld device or on a mobile. And they're all moving towards it.
Yeah.
So, but what's happening is they're beginning to all look the same. And now they're actually, a lot of them are putting they're trying to re-find what was unique and character to them. Like, a good example is the platforms at the moment. You've got the likes of Disney, Amazon, so on. They're kind of, there's a blandness to those. What we're really impressed with, like, so you take Netflix and the user experience, there's something kind of traditional, comfortable, old about it. I know that, and there's an origin story there as well in terms of where they started. And there's something old, but still something right of the moment. They have a bit of history, but they have a bit of but modernity and the systems that they're moving through. So it's trying to find that balance. And I think that's where a lot of brands are struggling at the moment, is to sort of say, how do I create character? How do I create resonance? So, you need to be really careful as you build out digital that you maintain that character, because that's where brands are going. They're trying to find individualism. They're trying to find something unique and trying to display that digitally. And that's where, we're finding we're engaged an awful lot, actually. And typography is going to play with that. the traditional font making, and that's becoming much more important.
Yeah.
What do you think the most successful part of the branding or identity for Netflix is, Connor? What would you think it is?
Oh,
All right. Do you know what it is?
right. Is it the sound?
Yeah.
It's the sound.
Yeah.
It's that,
Yeah.
and all of the other players try to recreate, replicate, beat that, but they can't. It's a two, and it's the most simplest. It's a two beat drum system. And the cat comes down, and the family comes down, and they all go, "Oh, it's Netflix time."
Look, I wanted to catch up with you because it is a real kind of landmark. You're going 30 years as long as the Backstreet Boys, just to say it again.
Dave likes the Backstreet Boys.
I mentioned it that before we started. I spoke to Debbie Millman, who's a phenomenal designer, and she also had this view that I get from both of you that there's a positivity and kind of this force for good that come out of design because it can do so much. So listen, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Chatting to you. Wonderful insights, wonderful story, and congratulations on 30 years. And here's to the next 30 for Image Now.
And no more Backstreet.
Thanks a million.
All right, thanks, Ed.
There is nature and everything else is design. That is a line that has stuck with me since I spoke to Dave and Darrell of Image Now. It is a great way to think about the world and the role of design in it. Design is and should be long-standing. It needs deep thinking and time to live and breathe uninvolved. And as I mentioned in the podcast, I spoke to one of the world's greatest designers, Debbie Millman, and it was great to see how similar the thinking is between her, Dave, and Darrell. Definitely worth listening to that. If you haven't, it is episode 6 in season 2. That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening to That's What I Call Marketing. And if you did enjoy it, of course, please do share, subscribe, add comments with your feedback, get in touch with us. You can find all our previous episodes on that'swhatIcallmarketing.com. We're on Instagram, That's What I Call Marketing, Twitter, _marketing. And our episodes are on YouTube, of course. That's what I call marketing. And if we can help you and your business grow through marketing, get in touch with us. That's what I call marketing.com and see how we can help.